Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Philip Osteen, Dean of the University of Utah College of Social Work. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this Grand Challenges for Social Work presentation. We welcome all of our virtual attendees. Thank you for making the time to join us live, or to those of you who are watching the recording at a later time. We express our sincere gratitude to those who donated while registering. These donations will specifically benefit our American Indian and Alaska Native College of Social Work students. Thank you again for your generosity. The Grand Challenges for Social Work began taking shape in 2013 as a groundbreaking project to champion social progress powered by science. It continues a decade later as a national call to action for our field's practitioners and researchers, specifically to harness social work science and knowledge base, collaborate with individuals, community-based organizations, and professionals from all fields and disciplines, and to work together to tackle prevalent social harms. Before we move into today's presentation, on behalf of the College of Social Work, I recognize our American Indian community members by acknowledging that this land, which is named for the Ute tribe, is the traditional ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. The University of Utah recognizes and respects the endearing relationship that exists between many indigenous peoples and their traditional homelands. We respect the sovereign relationship between tribes, states, and the federal government, and we affirm the University of Utah's commitment to a partnership with Native nations and urban Indian communities through research, education, and community outreach activities. Today, we are honored to welcome Karan Kolb Thorne and Judge William Thorne Jr. This presentation will focus on Ms. Thorne's work in creating California's groundbreaking My Two Aunties program. Following the presentation, Dr. Dina Ned, a faculty member here in the College of Social Work, will discuss audience questions with our presenters. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window to submit questions that you might have. Now, I understand that we have a more personal introduction of Ms. Thorne by the Honorable Judge Thorne. Judge Thorne, a Pomo Coast Miwok Indian from Northern California, was appointed to the Utah Court of Appeals in May 2000 by Governor Michael Levitt, after serving as a judge in the Third Circuit Court for 8 years and the Third District Court for 6 years. Judge Thorne has served for over 34 years as a tribal court judge in Utah and states throughout the region. He is the former president and current vice president of the National Indian Justice Center, a nonprofit that trains tribal court and other personnel around the country, and a former member of the board of directors for the National Court-Appointed Special Advocates, a nonprofit group that provides volunteer representation for abused and neglected children in court. Judge Thorne has served on numerous boards and task forces, and in 2016, the National Center for State Courts recognized him with their Distinguished Service Award, and in 2021, the National American Indian Court Judges Association recognized him with a Lifetime Achievement Award. Judge Thorne, thank you for being here and for your introduction for Karen.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. And Karen and I both appreciate the chance to spend some time with you and share her work, because she really is the star of this. But I just want to set the stage a little bit that in this country, there are roughly almost 500,000 kids in foster care. That's almost twice as many as there were from the 1980s. So we have made a conscious decision to utilize foster care as the intervention of choice, to where the average child spends 2 years in foster care, goes through 3 different placements. Some children, almost 20%, spend almost 5 years in foster care. And we know that, for example, foster care comes at a risk. It's not a safe neutral. One of the things that Dr. Folletti, who is the originator of the ACE study and information, he's acknowledged that when you place a child in foster care, you're adding one more ACE to their trauma score. We know, for example, that children who are in foster care end up with a PTSD rate twice that of Vietnam or Afghanistan and Iraq vets. We know that it's harmful if you age out of foster care. We know, for example, that 60% or more of those kids are homeless, in jail, or dead within 2 years. That foster care is not a neutral, but it's really heartrending when you talk to the kids who are involved. When I served on the Pew Commission in foster care, we listened to a young man, 16 years old, who told us every day he came home from school to his foster home, first thing he did was to look to see if his stuff was packed. in garbage bags by the front door. I mean, he had no sense of certainty. We like to think that our system provides certainty to these kids. It doesn't. We talked to a pair of twin girls who had been in foster care for 5 years, lived 20 miles down the road from each other, and had not seen each other in over 2 years. And there was not a single social, psychological, or safety reason why not. They had just not risen to the level of importance to somebody in the system. There are a number of instances like that that I would be happy to share with you. But this isn't about looking just to the problems in the past. It's about setting the stage for what we can do. When I left the court, I was seeing second, third, fourth generation kids in foster care. We need to break that intergenerational cycle. We also treat all of these cases as if they're the worst. I'm now serving on the Bipartisan Commission on Foster Care, and what we're trying to do is change the language. 2/3 or 80% of the kids who are in care are there for neglect, not for child abuse. So we need to change our language. So we're working on changing it to neglect and abuse instead of abuse and neglect. Sounds like a small difference, but when we focus on the abuse, we treat every case as if it's a torture case or where kids are locked up or mistreated instead of how do we help? And so what I want to do is share with you a program that I have come to learn more about with Karan. But the last introduction to it is I want to talk about the layman's definition of insanity. Do the same thing over and over and hope for a better result. Well, today's not, hope is not a strategy. Some days not a plan. So ICWA lays out the ground rules of what we like to think of as the pilot program for what foster care ought to look like. It shouldn't be restricted just to Native families, but all of those kinds of things could be done to make a difference for all families. So what we want to do this afternoon is show you that a different approach can be successful. The Tribal Family Service Program that was run by Karan for 15 years is an example. So 15 years ago, when she took over that program, there were 487 kids in foster care for a consortium of 7 small tribes. When she retired from the program in January of this year, there were 6. So from 487 to 6. And those 6 were in 2 extended family placements. So they weren't with strangers, they were with family. The additional aspect of that program, almost 200 people have gone through the prenatal program that Karen's program set up, where they infused culture and language into the prenatal program. Of the almost 200 people who have gone through that over the course of 2 years, there's not been a single child welfare referral. That's what success looks like. And so what I want to do is I want to introduce you, and you should know that I'm not unbiased on this. I've known Karan for 25 years. In April, she finally gave in and married me. So we've been married since April. Karan, you can say hello, Karan.
Hi, everybody. It just warms my heart every time.
So Karan has a master's, but one of the things that she made sure that I knew was that when she started the program, she didn't have a master's. So she didn't think the answer was in a book. So she thought everybody did this approach. So I'm going to ask Karan to just give you a little bit of information about herself, and then I'm going to start to ask her some questions about her program. So Karan?
Thank you, Judge Thorne. I was an untrained social worker back in 1994 when one of our psychiatrists ran after me out of the door and asked me to take on this job. And it was a brand new program called the Indian Child Welfare Act program. And I was one of its first employees, and I was hired as a prevention case worker. They already hired our manager and our court worker, and that was it. It was a team of 3 people and working for 7 tribes, and we had no idea where all those foster children were. And we were quickly overwhelmed because there was almost, out of the 7 tribes that we worked for, almost 500 kids in foster care of all different ages. And I didn't have a social work degree, and so I started the program in prevention services, just doing what I thought was the right thing to do by families, really. And that included listening to them, their stories. At that time, they didn't have any clue where their children were. So we had to kind of peel it back and look for the social workers and make relationships with the county and find all these tribal children and start monitoring and start going to court for these families. So as we went along, it was extremely overwhelming for just 3 people. So we had to build up our program and get more services into our program, and that included the domestic violence program, prevention programs, prevention early intervention, mental health programs. So we really had to build up from the floor down or up. And by the time I left, we had a staff of 11, and we really turned those numbers around by not removing kids. And we did anything and everything that we could with our relationships and our partnerships to really go out with the child welfare county workers and meet the family, get to know the family, teach them how to listen to the family, find all those services for the family, and not remove kids. And we kind of made a deal with them that, we'll go out with you, we'll get you in the door, and we'll find out what's going on, and then you will release that family to me for 3 months. And during that 3 months, if they don't comply with what you want them to comply with, because it was a child welfare referral, we would let you know if the family is complying or not. But more than that, we were able to talk to the family, find out what was going on with them immediately, what was the immediate need. But we also found out what was grandma's need, because it was more than likely a multi-generational family. There was a cousin on the couch. There was, another cousin in the extra room. There was, a lot of people in the home, but that home made up of that happy place. So we made sure that the family had routines and everybody knew what was going on in the home, and whatever problem it was, we fixed it. It was just kind of that simple.
Karen, tell everybody about the inspiration for the name, the My Two Aunties, where that came from.
Yeah, in our community and in many other communities, your aunt is like a second mother. When people lose a parent, especially a mother, the community comes forward, and it's just kind of automatic that aunt that comes forward and just assumes that role of parent. I know my sister and I, we exchanged our kids often, especially when it came to doing homework. I did her kids' homework. My kids did their homework with their aunt. It's just a different atmosphere, I guess, because as parents, we have high expectations for our children, or we have no expectations at all. And so that aunt is that person right in the middle there that will, put your arm around you, but will also let you know when you're messing up and tell you right to your face and help you get to where you need to be. So the Two Aunties was the name resonated with our community. It also resonated with my mother's tribe, who is from the Quetzal people in Yuma, Arizona. and they had birthing rituals that required two aunts to hold you up when you were having your baby. And so the name was a natural fit for a program that was going to help people. And who better to help is your uncles and your aunties. So we named it My Two Aunties, not to leave the uncles out, but it was a maternal, it started out as a maternal program for pregnant women. And the grant actually was from the Office of Child Abuse, and they did not allow us to service fathers. It was kind of one of those grants where you're only to do this, and we had to think outside the box how we would include those families. And so we did.
So, and share with the story you got from Tilly Black Bear.
Yeah, Tilly was a big advocate for domestic violence prevention in our communities. And she told this story about these sisters. There was 3 sisters going through the forest. And this story just changed my whole perspective of what a program should look like for a community. And while they're walking through the forest, they hear all these babies crying. And so they get closer to the shore and they see babies floating down the river going toward the waterfall. So of course the first sister jumps in and starts collecting all those babies and trying to save as many as she can. The second sister goes upstream and she jumps in the middle of the river and she starts teaching those babies how to flip over, how to doggy paddle, how to get to shore. And then the third sister keeps going upstream and they're saying, "Sister, where are you going?" And she said, "I'm going to go find out why these babies are falling in the river in the first place, and I'm going to stop it." And so that resonated with me on that's what a program needed to be, because we were drowning in court services and with just removals for mostly neglect. And so we had to make a program that would stop the babies from falling in the river, because the river to me represented foster care. And like Judge Lawrence said, I just retired after 30 years with the program. And so I've seen so much damage to our community with going into foster care, where it was really unnecessary for those kids to go into foster care when, you know, there was no propane in the home and kids were going to school dirty and smelly. Well, there was no propane in the home and there was no heat and there was no hot water. So you do little things like that and you fix that problem. But we've seen simple neglect. We've seen torture in our foster homes. We've seen some good in foster homes, I have to say that, but we've only seen more damage where kids were removed because there was no propane, but they ended up getting hurt, broken limbs, burns, things like that. And we've even seen death in our adoptive and foster families. So we just had to stop that river going and kids going down that waterfall. And when you're from a small community like our reservation, yes, we work for 7, there's 9 out here in our area, our service area. Some of those kids that get removed are your own relatives. And some of those kids that get hurt are your own relatives. And I know that made a big difference to me, but it shouldn't. It shouldn't make, when you're in this field of social work, we all got into this field because we want the same thing. We want to better people's lives, and we want parents to be the best parents as they can be, and we want to help get you there. But we got such a stigma of hurting kids that we had to change that. So the name My Two Aunties, I think, does that for our program and helps our community come into the door and turn that stigma around so that they know that it's a place to get the help that you need.
And what was the role, Karen, of the county traditional social services? How did that meld with your approach?
Well, we went toe to toe with a lot of the county workers, and because we were a new program, um, they didn't really care to change their ways or their practice. Neglect was neglect. They didn't know a whole lot about the native cultures out here, the family dynamics. We have dirt roads and old cars and everything, and they seemed to really feel that the reservation itself was a dangerous place, was a neglectful place. Our homes didn't look as nice as their homes did, so it was a huge learning curve. And but I think we managed to help educate those social workers and really made those relationships to let them get to know us. And once they, got to know us, then, we were teasing each other and, forming relationships and bridges with each other. And that also helped the county build their Indian Specialty Unit, which was a unit that helped all the 18 tribes and urban Indians in the city that weren't necessarily from the tribes out here, but we were able to work with the county so that they were able to fund our program a little bit more than usual because they saw that relationship that we built, and going out together really lessened kids coming into custody, and it lessened, the court cases and everything. Before, they couldn't find the parents out here. They would knock on the door and the person that answered would say, no, she's not here. She went down to her cousin's house down the street. I don't know when she'll be back. And, then they come to our office and say, well, we couldn't find the mom. And I said, well, who answered the door? Some young lady. I said, did she have tattoos on her forehead, on her chin? And did she look like this? And they said, yeah, that's her. I said, well, you were talking to the mother. She just told you that she wasn't the mother. And so it helped them successfully get those referrals closed up within 30 days. It also helped them knowing that we had this, we got this, we can work with them for 3 months. And then if we have to refer back to you and we have to go to court, then we have to go to court, and we're going to be the first ones to say, yeah, that family needs to go at a higher level, and these kids need to be protected in a different way. So we were really there as partners to do the best for the families. And so I think it resonated with the county workers on a different way to do social work. It wasn't always, I'm right, you're wrong. They have to like me. They started to understand our community a lot more. And we were kind of that buffer of extra social worker, really, to make sure that visits happened so that they could go and do other things with other families too. So we helped with the visitation, the CFTs. We had child protective team meetings at our office. We had team meetings. We roved between the county and we took turns. So we always knew what was coming down. And then we started training with the county, helping with the academy, some of the regional training centers, and the social worker initial classes. And so we started doing some trainings as well, and made them kind of the experts, as well as even our county council are specially trained in Indian child welfare, because like you said, Judge Thorne, it is the gold standard of social work. And providing those active efforts prior to any removal and active efforts during reunification is really the gold standard of all social work. And otherwise, we shouldn't be doing this.
Karen, a question came up about funding in the county. By the time you left, it was my understanding the county was funding you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it all started as being a referral source. So when the county got a hotline call, a referral, and they were trained to ask, is this a Native American family? And when it was, and it was one of our tribes, they simply sent us a referral to our office through the fax machine. And we would know that that family was in trouble. We would call a social worker. We would all work as a unit to mitigate the problems. We create a plan to go out and visit the home. The county saw a big benefit in that, and so they funded one of our positions to do the prevention work and to become a referral source. Community services to families, they called it. And then fast forward that, after 3 years of receiving that grant, they actually funded us more. By the time I left, I secured $2 million for 4 positions in our office to make sure that the families were getting more services, and guaranteeing that the social worker went out in tandem, and they did the referrals, and they basically let us do what we needed to do until a court proceeding needed to happen. But we were very successful in that, and that our community, we weren't getting a whole lot of referrals. And so we had to open up that contract, and we were able to do other tribal families, and then we were able to do non-tribal families as long as they lived in our service area. We were able to help those families out. They didn't even have to be tribal or within our community. So it was very successful, and I think when I left, it was $2 million that was given for the 4 positions for 2 years.
Okay, Karen, let's talk about what was different about your program, your approach. And I'm going to put it on the screen just so that people can see what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think the family focus, that just popped out perfectly. Look at that. Makes me look like I know what I'm doing, huh? Family focus, definitely. And it's a system where we're all, we all know each other. We're, in the same clans, we're in the same family units. We're cousins, we're, happy to see you. And so there was a trust that was in that they know. And my staff had to get really used to that, because some of the staff were not from the community, and they would come in and say, I want to speak to Karen, and only to Karen. And they had to kind of get used to my ways of doing that. Yes, I'll bring them into the office, I'll talk to them, and then I gently hand them off to a social worker. It'll get to them eventually. But I think the family focus, and every time you come into that office, the kids are going to leave with a book, maybe 2 books, maybe a kid quilt, a toy. And so we have play areas and everything. Doesn't look like a typical office. The other thing is that we were we trained ourselves to not be punitive, recognizing that everybody needs help once in a while. We remember those days of poverty out here. And so when you come in, it's not so punitive because you didn't do something on your case plan. We could throw that case plan out the window for the first 2 months to find out really what it is that you need, what it is that really got you where you're at today. So that's why it says success, not compliance, with that case plan. We want you to be successful, and we want to make a case plan that's truly individual to you and your needs, not my needs, or not the county's needs, or not the caseworker's needs. And so we had to really train our staff on how to do that, because it's easy to do, to roll your eyes when somebody comes in that just threatened to jump over the counter and wipe the smile off your face. But we had to train our people to, it's not about us, it's about the family, good, bad, or indifferent. They're in a place right now that you need to meet them where they're at this time. So, and not to be punitive about it. If someone were to say, well, you got yourself in this mess and that was your choice to do those drugs, I don't want them working anywhere near me.
Karen,
So,
a lot of programs focus on services to the at-risk families. Can you tell us what you did differently in that aspect?
yeah, you know, we didn't want to do that and point people out. You know, saving face is very important in our community. And so we created community-wide events and invited everybody there. And we would be having a county social worker there, the tribal social worker there, the foster family there, the parents there, and we would have one big happy reunion at that community-wide event, and nobody had a clue. So we didn't make it for at-risk families because there's a stigma there. You know, I have to come here because, you know, I need help, or I'm in rehab, or whatever the situation is. But our county workers were also invited to work the booth with us, put out T-shirts with us, serve food. So we really included the county workers there too, to make them feel included in their family. And that really worked. It worked so well that some of our clients, some of our families rather just talk straight to the county social worker and not the tribal social worker. And we had to get over that. We had to, you know, as long as they're talking and they're doing what they need to do, it doesn't matter who they go through first. And we're actually pretty proud that they don't take no for that answer, you know, if somebody's not in. So community-wide events is very, very important.
And I think I remember Karen talking about the fact that nobody knew what was going on, that you had a community event and then you did special outreach to bring in the at-risk families, the families who were struggling. But you use that for visitation purposes, but it was also modeling that the parents saw other families and how they were with their kids. And then they started creating connections with them so that they became informal supports for each other without even knowing that these families were, quote, at risk.
Right. And then they were doing crafting together and they find out a different interest and go from that. But you know, one of my favorite things to do, because I live very close to where I worked and I have to go over 5 speed bumps to get to work and pass a park, big ballpark on both sides of me. And to really see the strollers out there, the moms and the dads swinging their kids out there. It's very different out here than it was 20 years ago. And you see people out and about with their kids and their families.
So Karen, you trained your workers to do different. You trained them to treat people as if they're family members, to invest in their success. But tell us a little bit about what you did differently as a director.
Yeah, I think this is one of my favorite things that I got to do. Is I would always find a time, if it wasn't provided to me, weren't saying I want to talk to Karen, I would always find a time, maybe it was after a visitation or just a time where they came in, and I would just say, hey, can I talk to you for a second? And they would come into my office and I would ask these questions and kind of so it's like somebody with some authority in the office to ask them, are you getting what you need? Did I pair you up with the right tribal social worker? Are you getting everything? And take that time to really explain the situation that they're in, that this is only a little part of your life. You got all this life to live. You're just, you know, in a rut right now, and try to give them that visual. And also making sure that they're matched with the right social worker, because, you know, we don't know. I've had this situation before where one of my social workers wanted a case, but to later find out that mother that she had a case on, they had a brawl on the middle school yard. You know, they were in a power struggle when they were kids, and now they're adults. And, you know, I had to free up her future, because that's something that I can't have in my office. So after that happened, I asked the families directly, are you getting everything you need? Not to find out bad things, but to make any changes if needed.
I imagine that the clients weren't used to the fact that somebody in authority asked them their opinion.
No, they were not used to that, and they left feeling listened to. So, and after that, they just, you know, they just beamed. They just came in easy. They knew that they could talk to me anytime. I'd peek my head out and say hi. And so, and one of the ways that we see that that's successful is the next time I see them, maybe they've reunified, but they're bringing a niece or a nephew by the ear into my office and telling them, sit down, you know, you need to talk to her. And then telling me very strict and sternly, because that's how our Native families sometimes talk, is you need to tell this guy what's going to happen to him if he doesn't stop doing this crap that he's on. And that was the open door to talk to a youth, to do right by their family and to be a good father, and to get off of that path that they're on, that's going to lead them astray. So, and that's actually worked. I've seen that work. And then I'm, you know, back in the community getting gas or something, and that kid who's a grown man now has a family, and, you know, he'll say, hey, I did what's right. I did what you said. And, you know, I'm glad that my aunt took me in to have that talk with you, because I'm doing good. And that's always heartwarming for me as well. But yeah, they're appreciative of that.
And so did you see a change in the community about their attitude about social services when you transform it from a threat to a place where you go for help?
Yeah, we changed our name. We changed our branding. It was called the Indian Child Welfare Act program, the ICWA program. And so we changed our name to Tribal Family Services. And now, just on a natural spin of things, now people are just calling it My Two Aunties. You can go see your aunties, and that's even better. Or you need to go see your auntie. Go talk to your aunties over there. They're waiting for you.
So you transform the program from one of sort of probation, I've got my eye on you, to like the emergency room where you go to ask for help, not for judgment.
Exactly. So, and two, with that emergency room, you know, you get help and you get better. So it's a place to get the help that you need, and also to steer other people to that help.
Okay, and to get there, that's a lot of work for just a staff. So it's my understanding that you created partnerships. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, and the partnerships that we have are your normal partnerships, but there's some in there that are non-traditional allies. People like the people who work in your local grocery store, or your gas station. They're partners as well, because they see people who might be struggling with homelessness or mental illness. Not only did we do child welfare in our clinic, I also did the case management for the mental health services, drug and alcohol, domestic violence as well. So I knew people in those and those programs as well. And sometimes you can't find people. And so your grocery clerks and your tribal police are very good allies, because they're up on during hours that people are sleeping, and they know who's who and where they're at and what they're doing. And sometimes you can ask in a very confidential manner and find out what's going on. And then creating these partnerships, like a tribal child protective team. These people would be on your team, or they might be on the mental health crisis team or the case managers team. We also have doctors on that list as well, and other social workers. So always making those bridges. And you know, they started talking about my program, calling it a launch pad, because people who work there really went on to other programs, but they were a bridge for us. And so they're not really gone, they're just another extension of you. And you know, I've been in it long enough where I've seen social workers become judges, and you know, county council people become judges, and a lot of the workers are directors of different domestic violence programs and things like that. So it's really about building a program that you're always looking at people's abilities and where their future is at too, because we really don't want them to stay in child welfare, because we want to work ourselves out of a job. We want to do prevention services and not just court work, because everybody, you know, needs help.
One of the stories that you've told me, Karen, is about a grocery store manager or clerk who calls you.
Yeah, when he sees it, and it's from it's a little bit away from child welfare, but actually this client that I'm thinking of was in child welfare, but she was also a really sick diabetic, and this disease got a hold of her in so many different ways. And so the grocery store clerk would call me and just, you know, say, hey, so and so's over here and she's drinking an orange juice, banana, and a candy bar. And so I would take that cue as to, you know, go to the store for a second and kind of bump into her, right? And not to catch you doing things wrong, but saving her life, really, and then
So
finding other things.
So people began to see you and not as a place to get people in trouble, but to alert you that somebody needs some help.
Yeah, yeah, and that took a while, because they used to hide their kids behind their skirts when we first started. And now it's like, you know, that's your cousin right there. If you need any help, you go to her. And you know, and I've heard mothers say that to their kids about me now, instead of watch out for that lady, she'll take you away from us. And because that happened too in the very beginning.
Okay. And tell the group about what I call the rogue social worker story.
Well, we had a protocol here in San Diego that we
it's like 14, 18 pages. It's all in writing and all agreed to.
Yep. And it's really an agreement to work together as tribal social worker and county social workers, that no matter what time it was, 24/7, we had somebody on call to go out with child welfare at 2 o'clock in the morning if they had to, on emergencies. And so in that protocol had all of our names and emergency contact workers. And then this one social worker did not like to be told what to do. She'd been in the field forever. She was a good social worker, but she wanted to do things her way, and she didn't want to have to collaborate or go through the tribe or do anything like that. And she just felt that she knew best. So she came out in the middle of the night, had already talked to the receiving center, already had a van with the age appropriate car seats ready to come and get these kids. And so we had trained the sheriff's officers and and the tribal police, that if after hours they try to come out without one of the tribal social workers, that they would call. And so that had happened. And the sheriff said, because it was already fall and it was dark on the reservation, and she was scared. So she had the sheriff go with her, and she was going to remove these kids because she knew this family, and she had left the unit and came back, and this family was still, it was a popular last name, and she assumed that it was the same family, and it wasn't. And so the sheriff said, "Where's the tribal social worker?" And they said, "Well, their office closed at 4:30. There's nobody to come out with me." And he goes, "Oh, wait a minute." And he gets his walkie-talkie, immediately calls the tribal council member. The tribal council member walkie-talkied me on my phone and said, "Hey, cuz," because he's my cousin. "Hey, cuz, they're at so-and-so's house, and I'll be there in 2 minutes." It was right 2 doors down from me. So we were able to stop that removal and have the kids go 600 yards to grandma and grandpa's house. And there was no removal needed. It's just she had an opinion. She had left the unit and the same family on the same road. And she just put 2 and 2 together and decided that she needed to go remove these kids. But yeah, so that was the rogue social worker story, they called it.
So Karen's program concentrated on sharing information and training with the county. The county workers were invited to come to any trainings that Karen conducted. Eventually it became vice versa, where the tribal workers were invited to any of the county workers. But you can see from this list that she didn't stop with just social workers. She included anybody who touches the life of a child or a family, and made sure they knew that her program was an option for help, where you weren't turning people in, but it was an option for help. So Karen, you started off with a very small staff.
Yeah.
What did you do about the fact that most of these problems don't occur during office hours?
We just made that 24/7 availability. It was usually me, but if I wasn't around, it was somebody else was on call all the time. And it just had to be that way for a while until they really got used to that 24/7. But it was the right thing to do. And it took a while.
But by doing that, you ended up growing the trust level in the community.
Yeah, especially the first responders, your paramedics, your police, your tribal police, everybody, you know, you knew each other, and at events they was, you know, they come by and talk to you and, you know, offer you some information about so and so down the street. We're starting to patrol their house a little bit more, and doing things like that. So it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, and it takes consistency. So if they invite you to their meetings, you show up.
And you gave that same kind of respect to the families in terms of creating a plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other motto is nothing about us without us. So, you know, if we would not have a CFT meeting without the family. In fact, one good practice that we would do is at the CFT meeting, we would have kids, the pictures of the children blown up or in frames and there, so that people remembered why we were in that meeting. It wasn't about us, who's right, who's wrong. It wasn't about catching somebody on drugs. As a matter of fact, I could throw drug testing out the window. If you ask me, it's not important. We already know they're doing drugs. We know this. Why do you have to catch them? We know that it's going to be dirty. Why even waste your time right now? They're here. They're visiting. They got their case plan. You don't need to catch them. So yeah, joint
So
problem solving.
that building the trust would seem to me to work not only in tribal communities, but in other communities if people get used to being listened to. And
Yeah.
I noticed one of the things about your program was that you jointly created plans with the families. You didn't just hand it to them. You
Right.
asked the question, what do you need? Not just what do we have available?
Yeah. And we kept it, I know they're all supposed to be strength driven, but we really kept up the strengths in the beginning of that. What are you good at? What do you
What,
enjoy doing? What are your
what,
hobbies?
so I know that you put a motto on mouse pads and other things. So tell the group what the motto
Yeah.
was.
And we did that because we were doing ACEs assessments, and we were trying to train our doctors and the way they ask people and talk to people, because they're always telling you what's wrong with you. So we had to change their mindset. So we made all these little goodies for them, and it says, not what's wrong with you, but what's strong with you. So asking them what's your, do you rattle, do you dance, do you drum, what's your strength, and what are you known for in your community is another positive assessment. And we change all of our assessments to be strength based and to be culturally based as well.
And that allowed you to build on those strengths instead of
Right.
pointing out the deficiencies to people. So I would assume that made it easier to draw them in as partners in their own case planning.
And it did. And some of the services that we offer were with the My Two Aunties is the family strengths, lessons of parenting. Traditional parenting classes don't really work. So we did family skill building in our own language. We borrowed languages from different tribes around here, different stories. There's a story about a cradle board, about being organized in your home, things like that. And so we borrowed different languages in our language, especially, and made all of our curriculum into stories and native stories to make, instill that pride. And one of the things that we started seeing after 2 years, the people in the prenatal program, because we will follow them throughout their pregnancy and then a year afterwards, and they get all these little goodies and everything. But most of the people name their children tribal names, and I thought that was really neat to see, because they've learned them throughout the language courses and the stories.
And if you're proud of who you are and where you come from, you're less likely to make bad choices.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
So the two aunties are actually called social services navigators is the grant name, but we call them aunties.
Okay. So most offices, state offices, governmental offices, when you go in, it's very sterile. The receptionist usually looks up to you and just sort of almost like, do I have to help you? What's your name? Tell us what it's like, what you expect of your staff when people walk into your office.
Yeah, I expect them to get up off of a chair and out of the little, cubby area and greet you, say hi, talk to you, look at you. If they're able, get down on their knees and start reading with the kids while they're there. Find out if they've eaten, because we have a pantry there too. We even have, clothing and court clothes and things for the kids. So it's really, people are excited to see you. And if you bring your kids, the whole staff's going to come out of the woodwork to see the kids. It's just, it's the staff that they are. They love seeing people, and they love getting visited, and we get that reciprocated. What we give out, we get back. So sometimes not at the very beginning of a case if it happened that way, but usually by the end of the case or the middle of the case, people are like, yeah, I did it. I know I shouldn't have done that. And, you know, I'm not going to do it again. But, and they're very honest with you, sometimes a little too honest.
But that's something you can build on, you can work with.
Yes. And the
And-
one thing that I've learned in the 30 years is everybody comes home. This is their reservation. This is their place. They own land here. Their family owns land here. So they're going to come back. So if we have to put them in stranger foster care or foster care off the reservation, these kids are coming back. And so we teach the parents that, you have to be prepared. You have to get right now, because you're going to be a grandparent one of these days. And that just kind of like turns the aha moment on. And
So you don't give up just because somebody has had their rights terminated. And one of my favorite stories is about a woman who you were consoling who had just had her rights terminated. Tell us that story.
yeah, that was this mom who she was not going to be able to parent. And I just let her know that because she was sobbing in the hallways of the courts, and that's where you get most of your real work done, in that court hallway a lot of times. And so I was just consoling her and letting her know that, you know, he's going to be back. He's going to be okay where he's at right now temporarily, but this gives you time to work on a few things, and you got to get your, whatever the situation was, your meds in order, your rehab in order. You can't stop going to the psychiatrist or whatever it is, because you're going to be a grandparent one day. And when he comes home, I want you to call me. And so those are those favorite phone calls I'll get. They'll say, Karen, you were right. He came back. He's in his second year in Palomar College. He's living right here with me. You know, and I get to find out about how that relationship extended. And the best relationship is when they can have a relationship with the foster family or the relative placement that they're in, and everybody's working together.
So it's not a battle between the two.
Yeah, it's not us or them. It's not I'm right, you're wrong, you're better than me, I'm better than you. All that goes out the door. Yeah. Yeah, so you know, we don't have that professional distance, unfortunately. I know the county workers, when we talk to them, they don't like them working in the hometown that maybe they went to school. They might run into somebody they went to school with. And so they have to have this professional distance. We don't have that commodity out here. We get stopped at the grocery store. We have to be careful how we look at people, how we talk to people. I think everybody does, because you know, when somebody's in that place of getting your children removed, and body language is really important, because they already feel judged. So we don't want to make that worse, and that's one of the hardest things to do. And always finding that goal is one of my favorite things to do. Find people hobbies, connecting them with their culture, being that real advocate for the family, not just doing a job. Like I said, we want to work our way out of a job and not have to have kids in foster care.
One of the things I liked about your program is that if a family needed something, they never got to know just because you didn't have it available, that you would figure out a way to make it available.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, fortunately, I've seen Karen open up her own wallet to make sure somebody got what they needed. But that word gets around that this is a place you go for help, not judgment, and not somebody say, well, we can't do that, or that's not on our service list, or something else. If you're asking, you're going to get help.
Fit the grant. We'll find one that does.
And if not, you figure out another way to get it. So what do you expect of your workers?
I expect family-oriented service. I care for them just as much as the clients. I, definitely insist that they do self-care. They're having a bad day, I'm going to make them walk around the building a couple of times, or take an extended lunch, or take a 3-day, weekend. You always have to have your pulse on these wonderful people who do this kind of work. You got to take care of them and take care of yourself as well. But I don't want punitive people. I want people who are stern, can tell you when you're messing up, and lead you down that right path, but do it with a good heart and a good way. Yeah, thick-skinned, combined with a caring heart. Not your heart out on your sleeve, because people will, see that and try to take advantage. But always looking toward the future, which is something I think in Native communities we tend not to do. We're kind of like happy-go-lucky today, whatever it brings is good for me. But when families are in these kinds of systems, they have to look a little futuristic. But I want a staff that's going to take care of your immediate needs, and then look forward again, and always having a change in their case plan. If it doesn't work or they're not successful, change it up, do something else. It doesn't have to be that cookie cutter case plan either. And people who get along is always good too.
So the idea is that you do active efforts before to prevent the removal, to prevent the trauma. You do that by building trust, by incorporating the family into the larger community, by educating the community about how to let you know, or your program know, if somebody's in trouble, if they're struggling, so they can get help. The idea is to fix the immediate problem, not to make it a perfect family, but to make it a safe family.
Yes. And the foster youth as well. I remember I kept a can of SpaghettiOs on my microwave right in our little lobby for 3 years, waiting for this one foster girl to come back, because she had run away from the assessment center and got into some trouble. But she would call every now and again and just check in with me and say, I'm okay, I'm here, I'm there. And I would say, well, your SpaghettiOs are still here. Whenever you come to get them, I have some other things for you, just to, keep her engaged, because there was no hub for her. And she wasn't even one of our tribes around here. She was from a different tribe, but we kept this one place ready for her to walk in anytime she needed, and the doors were always open, and she knew it.
So I know we're running out of time, so I'm just going to put up the list of principles that sort of were the hallmark for Karen's program about creating partnerships in advance of problems, not waiting for the problem to show up and then now what do we do, but to line up those partnerships in advance so that you can jointly problem solve with your partners and with the family. A shared compassion for others. One of the things I loved about Karen was she likes that line, no tiara in child welfare. No glory for the workers, no pride in what's going on. The only thing that counts is success for the family and the community. Keep an eye on what's going on, individualized planning, and then helping the service providers better relate to the clients, because there aren't enough Native professionals. So Karen's program trained the non-Native people on how to work with these families. But the real clue is include those families, listen to them so that they can try and help. She got to the point where she could keep the higher ups in her office, in her clinic, out of her hair, because they trusted that she would do what was right. And she'd let them know if problems were going to arise, that they would find their way to their desk so that they weren't going to get ambushed. And as Karen says, bean counters don't do well with trauma and drama, which is where most of the clients live when they're in crisis. So her idea was to keep the higher ups out, let somebody who's going to work and listen to their families be there and gain that respect. So here's her motto, or her logo. that her nephew, great nephew, drew for her. You want to talk about that, Karen?
Yeah, that's the great Anthony Hurtado who made that, and the two sisters make up the mountains that are right on the north of us called Palomar Mountain, and that's the San Luis Rey River going down, where those babies were floating around. And so it just, they to me, they're like protectors. And so you can come in to our office and get whatever you need in parenting skills, and come into the My Two Aunties program, and that concept of having that surrogate mother in your community watching over you.
And it was the idea of help, not judgment.
Yeah.
And if you're interested in finding out more details about Karen's program, we published an article in the Family Justice and Integrity Quarterly in the spring 2022 edition. It's available online, and it's at page 144. And so I'm going to skip through all of this because I know we're running way past, but I want to get to the one thing that's important. This epitomizes what the program is supposed to be about. Life is not about how fast you run or how high you climb, but how well you bounce. Tigger got it right. Our job is to help families bounce, not make them perfect, but to bounce when they have a problem, bounce back up and keep going. So Dina, I know we went longer than we promised, so.
Not long enough, in my opinion, nor from the responses that I'm reading in the Q&A. I am just so grateful for both of you in this interview and your insights on such an urgent and important topic to all those who are on our webinar. So I'd like to transition over to a Q&A. I already have been looking at some of the questions that I'd like to then share with both of our guests. And as Dean Osteen began our webinar, my name is Dina Ned Chokma. I am a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation of Oklahoma, but I'm also on faculty here in the College of Social Work as an associate professor, and also the director of the Indigenous Social Work Scholars Program, which is support for Native students to become social workers, so that we start doing the work here in our colleges, in our departments, in our programs to bring relief to the service providers who, like Karen has shared, you are doing the additional training. So the first question I would like to pose is something that came up from our audience. Someone who is a college professor in social work, and they're wondering, it's a two-part question, what can an instructor in social work do to better prepare students to work with Native clients or an ever increasingly diverse population? And then second, what do you believe are some of the most effective things that a social work faculty can do to support Native communities and Native social workers?
Okay. Yeah, I think the best thing a instructor can do is to find a tribal family services program like mine or a different tribes, and invite that staff to become a guest speaker. And it gives both of them the experience of, pride in what I do, and also giving the students hands-on real life cases and scenarios and things. And it's also building that bridge between the School of Social Work and tribes, and for future workers to not be so afraid and intimidated by contacting a tribe. And what they're going to find is that the social services programs, because I think there's this big misnomer that that our population feels like the tribal social workers are as big as the county social workers, meaning they have a unit for hotline, a unit for adoption, a unit for continuing, a unit for court. No, they don't. The tribal social worker is a one-person job most of the time. And then they're bringing in other funding and other programs to supplement the work that they do, because one of my tribes could only afford $2,000 a year to do all their social services. And that's what we did. We combined it all together. But they're not really well staffed, well funded. So you'll learn that.
To that end, most county and state programs draw huge amounts of money from the 4E program. It's a $9 billion pot of money that is uncapped, meaning that you get reimbursed roughly 85 cents on the dollar for social work. Tribes on the average get 15 cents on the dollar because they're not eligible. Most tribes are not eligible for 4E funding. So while counties express frustration at not having the funds and the staff, their staffing level funded by the federal government is 4 times, 5 times higher than what tribes get. So have some grace when somebody isn't meeting your expectation. Understand that a phone call, rather than just a fourth email that says, I didn't get this, a phone call that says, I'm under the gun here, can you help me? The other thing to remember is that particularly tribal communities, but I think all communities, and I'm teaching judges this now, it's more important to listen than it is to direct. One of my teachers taught me, by teachers, I mean one of the elders in my life taught me that God gave you 2 ears and 2 eyes and 1 mouth for a reason. You should listen and observe much more than you speak. In tribal communities in particular, silence is okay. But one of the things I had to remember as a practicing lawyer in meeting with clients, and usually they would come in with 10 members of their extended family. And it would take an hour and a half just to talk around the subject before we could get to it. But it was about creating those relationships. All healing is tied to relationships. So you have to give yourself the grace to create that relationship and understand that that means listening, not just being up here and they're down here telling them what to do, but that the goal is to be partners. And that means I have to let you have your ideas and I'll share mine. And together we'll figure out what works. Medical science has now understood that 30 years ago, they used to just tell us what to do and expect us to do it. Now they know that it's much more effective to make a joint plan with the patient, look at the options, make a decision, and adjust as necessary. If judges and social workers could do the same thing in child welfare, I think we would move ahead faster.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it's putting it into practice. It's into action. And we have many social workers on this on the webinar today. We're hosted by the College of Social Work. And I think the question gets to social workers go into agencies that are part of systems and institutions. And what I heard today from this presentation and understanding My Two Aunties is it was about relationships. It wasn't about institutionalization. It was about that awareness that your community, you and your, Karan, staff of 2 others who went, honestly, above and beyond what a recent graduate with the letters behind their last name going to work for a state agency is going to say, no, I don't want to be on call 24 hours, 7 days a week. Right? So that change
in the morning when it involves a machete. Yeah.
Exactly. Right?
But that what you're talking about, Dana, is investing in the success of families, not just point them in the right direction, but actually being personally invested in helping them succeed as if they're your relatives.
That listening, that's what someone has said here, listening is so important. And that is great advice that we are getting today. And maybe that is what is missing in our social services of why it has harmed and hurt not only our Native children and families, but any of the children who have gone through the foster care system, right, without having someone in their lives to listen. And that was one of the other questions we had, which was, what was the process that you trusted to be able to find a solution when clients, when you ask them, what do you need? Not what you had to provide, because social services were a list of references, were a list of services and resources. My Two Aunties was not that. What was the process that you went through to trust you were going to be able to find them what they needed?
Yeah, flexible schedules as well, because things just don't happen between 8 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. They happen when you get up with the kids. They happen at night after feeding them and putting them down, and those special routines that you have with your family and your children, so that you can have that me time. I love putting my kids down to bed at 7:30, regardless of if it was a weekend or a holiday, because that was my me time. That self-care that you need, and routines that they get 3 books and prayers or whatever your routine is at night. So having flexible schedules for the staff was key, so that they can go into the homes at 6 a.m. or 6 p.m. to help people make those routines.
Thank you. That's many of the comments that I'm reading here in the chat and the questions really is getting at the time. It was something you said of nothing about me without me.
Yeah.
And the idea about the resources that showed up in the Q&A. One of the things I've noticed about Karen's program is I don't have that available yet, which means that she's going to work on it. It may not be there next week, but eventually it will be there, because she's not going to give up until that is. So the next family that has that need, it will be there ready for them. So it's never, the program is done, that's all there is. If you have a need and they can't figure it out, they're going to work on it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I found is important for clients, whether in the courtroom or in the social work area, is if they know you're trying, they know you haven't given up on them or you're ghosting them, they'll hang in there with you while you're trying to figure it out. When you don't let them know anything until you succeed, they're liable to give up and walk away.
You don't leave them sitting alone in this process.
Yes.
It is a frightening, scary position to be in when the threat of the removal of your child is before you.
Yeah.
And something that was highlighted in this presentation that that long-term investment that this program has done, not only that amazing statistic, because we have researchers here who are like, what do you mean you went from 497, almost 500 of your community's children in foster care down to 6? But what is amazing about this is that long-term generational change that has now occurred, again, about the time, the building of relationship, of being with the family and the children and their extended families
and the community.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So that at some point, it's that ripple effect of your resources in the program can address those emergent, highly crisis-oriented cases, because you have the community who has been trained, if you will, in communication and how to be there to support versus to
and head off the
punish.
crisis.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you hear stories about families doing their own interventions on families, and it's great. The two aunties walking down that dirt road really hard. It's oh, there they go.
So this is one of the things that Karen has pointed out is when one auntie comes to visit you, that's great. That's just neighborly. When two aunties come to visit you, that's a tribal intervention.
Yeah, they come knocking, you're like, oh no, what did I do?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
you're gonna be told straight up. Um,
yeah.
One more question that sort of adds on to this point of someone's curious about how long, Karen, did you feel it took to create this, to implement, to train the community and native and non-native, and then how long did it take to begin seeing its success?
Yeah, I think throughout the whole span of my career, I was watching it, but when it really started to take off was because I worked for an agency. I couldn't really move up until I got a degree, um, and it didn't really matter what degree my degree was in. I just had to get a degree, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do what I was already doing. And I think it took about 8 to 10 years to really turn that around. And by that time, most of the kids were aging out. They were a little bit older, and we had already stopped removing toddlers. The cases that we started to see were really infants who were born in other hospitals not around us. And the other thing that tribes have to do with tribal family services and ICWA is we don't just work in the place that we're housed. We work, if there's an ICWA case from one of our Luiseño tribes, and this has happened, I've had cases in New York and Texas, you have to work those too, kind of long armed. So that's the other component about our program that's kind of special as well. But I think 8 to 10 years it really took driving it, training it, finding the right people, and maintaining and keeping those right people too. I had some really dedicated staff who said if I left, they were going to leave right with me. But I think they had other plans for me to do something and take them with them. But no, I'm retired.
Retired, but not really.
But not really. No, this is the education. This is the sharing for the next.
She didn't tell you that just last week she had that whole staff over to the house for lunch, just to keep them going.
Yeah,
It was just hot dogs, chili dogs, but you know,
that's the best.
Chili dog, ping pong, yeah.
That's family cooking is what that is.
Yeah.
So those 8 to 10 years, that's how long it took you to get up the river.
Yeah, it surely did. It surely did. Yeah. So it wasn't it's not easy when you don't have a organization that's flexible. So you have to work around those really stiff things and find those branches that will bend and then take it to the wind.
Thank you. Thank you both. Looking at the time, I'm going to transition back to our dean for him to close out our webinar. And I just want to say again, Yakoki, thank you so much for what you've shared. And it will be my honor to carry on this conversation here in our community. There are quite a few people who are asking about more training, understanding more about this, because it's going to be very specific to every community, as it should be, because that is what tribal nations and the indigenous peoples of this land, of Turtle Island, are unique. So with that, thank you. And Dean Osteen.
Thank you so very, very much. And let me add my own personal sincere thanks to everyone that's been involved in this work. To Ms. Thorne for her incredible community engagement and work, to Judge Thorne for his expertise, and to Professor Ned for helping moderate this. I want to thank all of our guests for their time. I want to thank all of you who have joined us today, either live or online. And I just want to say personally, this talk today has resonated deeply with me and just reminds me of my own philosophy about social work, that it's meant to be relational and not transactional or authoritarian. It's relations where the best work happens. The College of Social Work is committed to the long-term work of recognizing and dismantling racism and interrelated oppressions with the goal of supporting a just, equitable, and inclusive society. We are dedicated to this speaker series as part of our effort to address the grand challenges for social work, which are truly grand challenges for each and every one of us in our communities. For attendees who are seeking continuing education hours, please watch your email in the coming days for links to the recorded presentation and a brief quiz. Upon successful completion of the quiz, the CEU certificate will be emailed to you. We welcome you to join us throughout the academic year as we delve into many more evidence-based research presentations addressing the major challenges our society is facing. Please visit the college's events page for information on all of our events, including our newly launched podcast series, Big Ideas in Social Work, a national conversation on some of the most pressing issues in social work today. And with that, thank you again for being a part of this discussion. Please be kind, be safe, and be well.